So the topic of the session is really what the future holds for Ringier, but we talked a little earlier today, and I want to start with what the future holds for all of you, and ask Robin. We'll get to Ringier in a bit, we talk, but I want to ask Robin about the trends you see that are going to affect everybody in the room. You were in charge of the Ringier marketplaces. Now you have a little different portfolio. What do you see happening during the next 3 to 5 years for all of the marketplaces?
If I just knew. I think most of the big trends and topics have already been touched the last 4 or 5 hours, and there is not something completely different. It's about the big buzzwords of going into the transaction, ancillary businesses, etc., etc. But I think what we are now experiencing in terms of macroeconomic changes, something that started with COVID that is impacting our supply chains globally, talking about the car business in particular, cyclical economic changes that will impact e-recruitment businesses, the war that has additional impacts. I think this will change the way, sometimes accelerate, but also sometimes slow down the trends that we are all talking about. The most important, nevertheless, is, and this was also mentioned earlier today, 3 to 5 years ago, we talked about what's possible in terms of these trends, and now we see it happening. And the biggest question, at least for us at Ringier, is just about timing and prioritization.
What are you prioritizing?
I think it's definitely about on-platform communication. I think it's definitely about which are the ancillary businesses, the part within a user journey, a seller and buyer journey that have in the next 18 to 36 months the biggest potential to be monetized. And I think that's the most important thing to focus on. And we're struggling with it because, of course, every month there are globally 10 to 12 different business models and ideas popping up that we can all observe, and it's very tough to focus on the right thing. But at the end of the day, this is what matters, because the things we do, we have to do correctly. And we should also keep in mind that whatever we do and how fast we accelerate the different new changes, products, etc., we implement, I still think 80 to 90% of the core revenues in 5 years will come from today's core business. But that's not necessarily true within a longer period of time, of course. And if you don't start now, we're lost.
There's a lot of opinion, if not an outright consensus, that there will be a global recession in 6 months, a year, 3 months, tomorrow, at some point. What happens to marketplaces, and particularly horizontals versus automotive versus real estate versus recruitment? What happens to marketplaces if and when there's a recession?
It depends on the geography, and it depends on the business model. I think what's clear is that, and we saw this during COVID, which was also a big crisis. I think the most important is if you are strong in a market, or if you have a new product that solves the needs that come up during a crisis, if you do the right things with your employees, with your talents, with your clients, with the industry, you have a huge chance to come out stronger of such crisis. And then, of course, we have a real estate industry that is maybe across the verticals the most conservative one. They will suffer during a recession as well. Means they have to move, means digitization there maybe accelerates again. Across the three, including horizontals, 4 verticals, in a recession, there is an even bigger need for efficiency. I think through the right digital products, we can bring efficiency to our businesses, but more importantly, to our clients' businesses. There is always a big opportunity. Jobs will suffer most maybe from a profit margin point of view because it's mega cyclical as well. But I don't know. I mean, we do many of our e-recruitment businesses. They have 50 to 70% profit margin. Maybe for a couple of years we have to accept that 30%, 40% is also a good business.
Yeah, 30 to 40% is nothing for people to complain about. Of course, if you've been making 60% or 70%, it becomes a little difficult, but it's still profitable. And as Andres pointed out, profitable right now
is king, and cash is king.
Is very, very good. Horizontals. Are horizontals going to fare well, fare better structurally if there's a recession, or?
I think definitely during a potential crisis, horizontals are, if they're correctly set up, in a better position, because yes, there are most probably more people that want to sell the stuff they don't need at home. There are more people looking for affordable, well-priced used items. That meets with a social trend of living more sustainable lives, using more vintage, more used products anyways. I think for horizontals, if they are transactional, if they are kind of next generation horizontal, there are anyways very good times ahead.
Good. Ringier is it Ringier or Ringier?
Originally, it's a French name, Ringier, so
Ringier.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but Ringier is okay in English.
Well,
But I pronounce it differently than my uncle and then my brother, so don't mind.
Okay. You're Swiss-based, and obviously the bulk of your business is in Switzerland with the Swiss Marketplaces Group. You've got strengths in Eastern Europe, a number of countries there, a smidge of a business with a lot of great potential in Africa, and then you've got a little tiny mess of a business still in Myanmar.
Yeah, well, that was taken away more or less.
That had great potential, but obviously things have changed there. With the developed, the mostly developed in Eastern Europe, and the emerging markets or the beginning stage markets in Africa, what excites you the most?
I think what excites me most is that we have 7,000 employees, about half of them in Switzerland, half of the rest in Central Eastern Europe and Africa, that are best in class in their countries, in their environment, and they learn from each other, and that they nurture each other, and that we bring ideas from all the different geographies, countries, business models together. That's for me the most exciting thing about Ringier, and particularly about our investment in Africa. Kind of 8 years ago, the notion at headquarters was, we go to Africa and bring technology and know-how, etc., etc. And this has completely changed. These businesses are revenue-wise not very big, but most of the brands are market leaders in amazing countries with great potential. And what I think people at Ringier learned is that we can learn from these countries, the people and the aspects of digital business where they are ahead of the curve tremendously.
Tell me more about the Africa ahead of the curve. By the way, this company has some of the greatest recruitment URLs in the world. No fluff jobs, profession in Hungary, Brighter Mondays in
East
Nigeria
Africa.
and East Africa.
Brighter Monday, and
then
Jobberman is
and then Jobberman. Now in the States, of course, you couldn't call it Jobberman. You'd have to call it Jobber Person. But Jobberman, look, the politically correctness in the States is ridiculous. But great URLs. But talk about Africa and what you're learning from Africa, because so many companies think we're smart because we're in a developed world. we can't learn from them, when as you pointed out, there's a lot to learn from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's quite easy to explain. In many of the African countries we're operating, you have an average age that is around 17, for example, in Nigeria. So we're always talking about the digital natives, etc. in Europe, the US, in the Western world. No, the real digital natives are in Africa. And there is a complete different way how they handle communication, how they do searches, etc., etc. And once you manage to understand this and learn from it, there is a tremendous value that you can kind of bring to the entire group. I mean, I remember some tries we did with a car business that we sold in the meanwhile, because we did not succeed at all with cars in Africa, but we imported used cars from Japan and sold them via WhatsApp groups. We sold to the CEO of a bank in Kenya 70K used car, purely through WhatsApp. No communication, no call, nothing. And then you start seeing the potential of these ways of communication. You see what's needed, and this inspires people, and you just start thinking differently. And we make sure at Ringier that our people travel a lot, that they meet, that they see, smell, and really feel what's going on in different geographies. And I think this is incredibly broadening the horizon, and it's inspiring.
And in Africa, I presume there's nobody on a screen larger than this. I mean, it's all mobile.
A lot is mobile, but then still, obviously, you have a certain segment that is using the internet mainly in the office, that has still computers, etc. Funny enough, we do also a big media business in Africa. And what was fastest growing now, the last, not fastest, but over proportionally growing, were the desktop traffic, the desktop views. So, but for sure, 90+% is mobile, and it's also not necessarily happening on your platform, but on the social media channels of the platform.
We'll get to Slido in about 3 minutes, by the way, so send in your questions. In addition to marketplaces, you have sports, you
Yes.
have e-commerce.
Well, e-commerce was one of the
shopping,
strategies we tried kind of at the beginning of our transformation period. Time, and obviously, we have been for 175 years a traditional printing and publishing house. 0 digital revenues 12 years ago, and somewhere you have to start, and we started marketplaces, and marketplaces really became part of our DNA, and we know how to operate and master it. At the same time, 10 years ago, we thought, if we do marketplaces, e-commerce is very similar, and so let's do this as well and invest in some businesses. We learned that this is much more about low margins and high volumes, and a completely different game. And we have still one very successful and good business in Switzerland. We failed elsewhere, and it's not our core strategy to grow in e-commerce necessarily.
Several of your Eastern European businesses took an active role in helping people who came from Ukraine and in supporting Ukrainians during especially at the outset of the war, but on an ongoing basis. Tell me a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, I think, helping people is anyway the duty of everybody in business, and we try to help people coming to Switzerland from the Ukraine, but beside that we have 4 countries that are neighbors of the Ukraine, with obviously a lot of people escaping to these countries. We tried helping them through some e-commerce solutions, obviously special solutions where they can find jobs in Poland, in Romania, etc. We are supporting all our employees at Ringier that take up refugees with a monthly amount we pay them in order to support them. Then we have 2 smaller investments in the Ukraine. So obviously they're supporting these people. One company managed to bring most of the employees and their families out of the country before the invasion to Poland, where we have big operations and are supporting them. But this is still small things we can do.
But you
yes,
got to
of
do
course
what you
we
can
it.
do.
I mean,
You've got to do what you can do. Ringier is one of the very few companies that we can find that has automotive, real estate, recruitment, and the general goods category, the horizontals with the general goods. Do you see them all as complementary or different, or
No,
just?
of course, they're very different, different industries, full stop.
Yeah.
I think maybe 10 years ago we had the idea that you can play synergies between cars and real estate portals in quite a big fashion, maybe even together also with the media. I think the synergies are there, but much smaller. I think there are definitely synergies between horizontals and verticals. That's different. But 95% of the businesses must work quite independently.
Slido just came up and then went away. There we go. Interesting. Are you looking to move
I would
into?
love to. I would love to because.
Well, you lived in Mexico,
I studied Latin American culture, and I'm highly personally attracted by Latin America. I lived many years in Mexico. My first son is born in Mexico and has Mexican passport. So I would love to become as big as possible and to move even our headquarters from Zurich to Latin America. But I think at the moment this is
Hero
just
LX
out
Brazil
of
is
scope.
profitable and might be right
But,
price.
you know,
Call your friends at Adevinta.
I mentioned before also about focus and doing less things, but what you do right. And this applies also to this question. Maybe in a few years we have the opportunity, but at the moment let's focus on the big opportunities we have at hand in the countries we are already active.
That's a very interesting question. How do you compete with the Chinese who are very heavily investing in Africa? And is that a pain point for you, or are they not really? They're more investing in infrastructure.
I think the Chinese are obviously, they're having their master plan for Africa, investing into infrastructure, agriculture, everything related to mining, etc. But in our industries, I think they are rather bringing growth, of course. They are rather helping the car industry, etc., or the real estate industry through developments to boost, but are not active in the verticals we are, or in the digital publishing area.
Africa is very small, but obviously a high growth area for you. Do you consider it developing markets, emerging markets, or markets that are just going to continue?
You know, if we would have asked ourselves this question when we went 1990, 91 to Central Eastern Europe, we maybe would have never gone there. You never know, are you too early, are you too late? I think we went at the right time to Africa to learn, to explore, to grow, to build at what we have now, 10, 12 clear number one brands that still for sure under-monetize, but that are huge, that have huge potential for the future.
And what was your biggest surprise doing business in Africa?
You're focusing a lot on Africa. My biggest surprise, I don't know, maybe how fast we managed to give most of the businesses purely into local hands. So we really found amazing talents, and we had the luck that also many of the talents stayed with us for many, many years. And I'm super happy that particularly marketplaces, most of the businesses, if not already all, are 100% localized, no expats anymore, etc. And this is something I like a lot, because at the end of the day, you must be tremendously local in early stage countries in order to handle, steer and gear the businesses, particularly in troublesome times.
So to flip it on its head, your biggest marketplace obviously is your biggest market overall. You're based in Switzerland, flew from Zurich. Had two competing businesses, number one and number two, and somehow or other, somebody managed to put together TX Group and your marketplaces into one company. How did you pull that off? And what was the driver for bringing them together? And why did you feel it was necessary?
No, I think this was a very long process. We had the first talks 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Oh, really?
Had negotiations. It failed. Some people at Ringier and some people at TX Group considered this a big mistake. So we always kept talking. And I think at the end of the day, the potential of this new company is so big. Plus, I think all shareholders realize that it's much better to fight the bigger enemies outside Switzerland than the small colleague inside the country, that it was just a logic move to do so.
And that was built really to go with an IPO in what, 6 months, a year?
No, definitely not in 6 months. I think first we really have to form this new company and, you know, deliver results. And I think a big driver and a big reason for doing this joint venture was also to bundle the energy, particularly in product development, etc., in order to bring better products to our clients and customers. But in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years, definitely the IPO is the goal of the 4 shareholders. Then we must have the right market conditions to do so as well. But in a couple of years, definitely that's the goal.
I have time for one more, Simon?
Yes.
Thanks. It went away. The question that was there was the question of the lessons learned with the companies that you invested in that didn't do so well. What are some of the lessons that you learned from your mistakes? Because we all love to learn from, if we make mistakes, and nobody out here has ever made a mistake, but if we make mistakes, learning from the mistakes may be the best part of it.
Yeah, I think 2 things. At the end of the day, it's about people. And that means if as a